How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to World End Economica, episode 1. Now, things have been getting interesting. The relationship between Hagana and our boy Hal has started to get better. Lisa has given us a good little talk about her desires, her wishes. She wants to help. She wants us to basically be nicer to Hagana because Hagana is struggling to come out of a shell from the looks of it, and she's incredibly smart, that we have learned as well. And we're learning a lot more about these characters. We're finally getting into learning more about the characters themselves, and that is always the better parts of these sorts of visual novels. So I'm very intrigued to see what happens in this episode. Before we get into it, though, just a reminder to check the link in the description below to pick up a copy of my book, The Protector, Volume 1, a dark fantasy original English light novel featuring humans, angels, and demons in a world not too dissimilar from our own. It's the first few chapters are up on my Facebook page to read. Not first few chapters, sorry. The first few pages are up on my Facebook page to read. Check that out. So if you follow my link tree, there will be all my social medias, my coffee account, and also a shop section. I'm looking to include more links to different countries' websites where you can buy it. That's not just Amazon. So if you want to pick up a copy for yourself, comment below what your country is, and I will find the best website in which you can pre-order or buy a copy of the book in your country. So yes, let's get into things, guys. Maybe it was due to the weather, but the markets today didn't really have any particular momentum, making my job difficult. Stocks could only move either up or down, and so on a day where there was no clear direction of movement, trading strategies I'd usually use yielded nothing for me to do. For example, there were times when the stocks would all tumble because of some random trigger. As a result of my gluing my eyes to the news, I realized that it didn't matter exactly what triggered it. It might be, for example, that large enterprises' fiscal reports were bad, or a politician of a developed country was caught in some immoral scandal, or perhaps that the planets had aligned. I knew that on those days it didn't matter whether a particular company had good earnings or bad earnings. Its stock would get dragged down in price anyway. Hence, on those days, I'd watch the display without trading, seeking out stocks that had been dragged down by the general sentiment in the market. It's strange, but on those days when stocks would fall for some random trivial reason, I'd always see people selling off as if the world were ending soon. These cowards would sell off that day, but would then rally the next. I'm getting like a stark reminder of like cryptocurrency in this. I know cryptocurrency is just essentially stocks, but for money. It's like they say it's money, but in reality, it's basically stock trading. It's like one for one, essentially. On the other hand, when the markets were on a bull run, it became a chaotic festival, when people were selling and buying stocks one after the other. But on dull days like this, I could buy some stock for 10 moles, and it'd remain at 10 moles for the rest of the day. And if I did that, I'd definitely lose out due to the commissions. I was scoping out the situation during morning trading, but it looked like it was going to be like this for the whole day. On these days, if I forced myself to do some trading, I'd only end up losing in the end. Even disregarding that, my recent losses had started standing out, so I didn't push myself and decided to close the computer. But man, the rain. It was dark outside, and the drizzle continued. Outside my window was a narrow alley, so no one passed by. Shutting down the computer made the room silent except for the sound of raindrops hitting the ground under the eaves. The eaves? Hagana should be in the next room over, but it was silent as well. Wonder what I should do. This was the problem once I decided to not trade for the day. I'd end up not being able to figure out what to do. Anyway, I decided to leave my room and walk down the dim hallway towards the living room. Entering the living room, I saw Lisa reading a book while sitting on the shabby sofa. Oh, a new render with her with a book. Oh. I guess Lisa must have noticed my footsteps as she turned towards me. I didn't answer immediately, and instead took some orange juice from the fridge and poured some into a cup. Well, it would probably be more authentic if it were some middle-class family from the White Belt, but around here the orange juice was just some orange-coloured sweet-tasting chemical concoction. Not working on the computer today? Can't get into the mood. Oh yeah? Well, I guess you do have those days. Lisa wasn't particularly interested and returned to reading her book. It wasn't some digitized version, but the real deal. When her slender fingers flipped a page, it made an unreliable sound. What are you reading? Lisa looked at me and paused for a second. It looked like she was thinking about how to answer my question. It's a very old book you totally wouldn't get. It's called The Protector Volume 1 by Trent. No, that's a lie. Of course that totally wouldn't get her mimicking. Of course that totally wouldn't get was her mimicking me. When I made a face, she turned back to her book, her shoulders shaking with amusement like a child's. Fraser's The Golden Bow. What? It's a book of religious stories from all over the world, collected by some curious Englishmen more than 100 years ago. On rainy days, I start wanting to read this for some reason. Lisa flipped the page again while talking. Is it interesting? Well, the book itself doesn't present any clear conclusions, and to be honest, there's a ton of falsehoods in here as well. However, it is the distillation of millennia of human culture, so it is the... God, I need to pronounce words properly. At that point, Lisa stopped to press her face up to a page as if she was savouring the scent of the book. Perhaps it's just as appropriate for a Christian like me to be reading this book while it's raining on the moon. Totally not getting it. There's that saying that you shouldn't underestimate the world. I got the feeling that she dodged the question, treating me like a kid again, and I scratched my head lightly. So in the end, it's just an elegant way of passing the time, right? Exactly. A simple reply actually made it more uninteresting. In other words, it was pretty stupid to continue, and I heaved a sigh. Speaking of which, you sure look bored. I guess. My goodness, a proper young person being idle isn't a good thing. On days like this, it's best to stay put. Well, I agree with that, but there is a problem. Problem? Of course there is. It's unhealthy for a young man to merely listlessly wander around all day. Well, there really isn't anything for me to do, so what should I be doing? There's nothing? What, are you going to suggest I go study or something? Lisa smiled with a troubled face. Do I look like the type of person to say that? Surprisingly, no. She then laughed at my response. You don't have any hobbies or other... You don't have any hobbies other than doing your computer thing? Hobbies? I furrowed my brows instinctively and shot back a reply. Hobby. You're calling this a hobby? Don't tell me you actually don't have anything else. What? I kind of shrank back from Lisa's serious gaze. No problem with that. Oh? I totally don't have time for no hobbies. I said that from the bottom of my heart, but it ended up sounding like an excuse. I needed to win at the stock market to survive. I needed to excel at the stock market for my dreams. If there was one thing I lived for, I couldn't imagine it being anything other than standing where no one had stood before. I had no time to do leisurely things Lisa would do, like passing the time reading useless books from the annals of history. It was true that I currently had nothing to do, and was just wandering around. That was because trading was unexpectedly not going too well. Oh my god, so many words. You could cut out half these words. You don't need all these words there. Alright. Well, if you're okay with it, then that's fine, I guess. After staring at me for a few moments, she returned to her book. Part of me wasn't quite satisfied with something, but I couldn't pinpoint what. Unable to figure it out, I continued to stare at Lisa, who then turned a page and said, "Well, you know the saying, man does not live by bread alone." What? I responded in earnest because I actually didn't understand, but Lisa didn't give me a reply. She was deep into her book as if I had simply disappeared. I guess it's some book more than a century old about the gods of Earth, filled with mountains of lies. It'd be impossible to imagine anyone other than Lisa reading such a book on the moon. It's not like there'd be a hobby as pure as this. Usually I'd just write it off as some idiot wasting their precious life on useless things, but right now I felt as if I were on the losing side for some reason. I was not mistaken to dedicate my daily life to stock trading, and right now there was a good reason for not trying to push myself to trade. However, I felt uneasy, getting the feeling that I would be very mistaken to simply stand here. But it was true that I simply wasn't in the mood today. It was a pain to search through stocks even though I decided not to trade today, so I also didn't want to return to my room with the computer. I wonder if my feeling like crap was also a product of the rain. As I was staring out the window, I heard a soft pam. Looking in the direction of the strange sound, I noticed Lisa had closed the book. And then she laughed in resignation. "Oh well, big sis Lisa here will play with you." It's not like I was asking for that. "Oh, really?" With that, she simply pulled back. I was actually happy inside about her offer, and thus I regretted my childishness. However, Lisa apparently was able to sense my actual feelings and see through my act. And then she chuckled and stared at me leisurely. Boys sure are stubborn. It was true that I didn't have a clue as to what I should do with my spare time. And besides, if I became pig-headed here, I totally pass out thinking about my stupidity later. But it wasn't on the level where I could just say, "Hey, let's play." I was hesitant for a bit, then conflicted. Finally, I ended up announcing my surrender with a sigh. I wanted to at least stress that I was going along with this because I had no other options. "So what shall we do? Since you have a computer, want to play some games? Or maybe we should bake some cookies." "Cookies? Oh, you wanted to make some cookies? You wanted to make some cookies? Well, that means Agana could have some later, so let's do that." Well, it's not. Even though I voiced my complaints, they didn't reach Lisa's ears. She got up from the sofa and performed a big stretch towards the ceiling. "It's been a while. I wonder if I'm still any good at baking them." Oh well. I gave up and looked at Lisa. "Well, let's start with some cleanup, and then we'd gather the ingredients. It'd be okay to rush past that if we were making something else, but with sweets, preparation and process is quite important." "Oh yeah?" "If we were going to do it, we might as well make some fantastic cookies." Yep, she sure looked like a school teacher. She kinda does. Christian school teacher. "Well, let's... Oh, hold on. Baking music." "Well, let's first ready the utensils." Okay. Following Lisa's instructions, I collected the utensils and set them on the table. "Since it would be bad to get your clothes dirty, here, put this on." Lisa handed me an apron. This was something she had always donned when making dinner. "If I put this on, what are you going to use?" "Me? Since I'm just giving directions, I wouldn't need one." "What?" Okay, let's first get 150 grams of butter. Here. 150 grams. Oh, this scale was calibrated for Earth use. Just divide by 6 and you'd be fine. What's next? 200 grams of cake flour. That don't divide evenly. Or that doesn't divide evenly. Treat it like real life. Make compromises. Such nonsense. This will be fine, right? What's next? 70 grams of granulated sugar. Bit of baking powder. Does call for 1 egg yolk, but I guess a whole egg would be fine too. Hey, I can at least separate out a yolk, you know. Okay. Once you've placed all those on the table, spread out a paper towel beneath and sift the cake flour well. If we did a half-hearted job here, the flour would be all clumped up. Oh yeah, I guess I've seen something similar in the kitchen before. While recalling something I had seen ages ago, I tapped the sieve, sprinkling flour down. Oh, your mom's homemade cookies, huh? I wonder if mine would be a match for that. No idea. I'm a bit young to be able to pick up a wife's tastes, so I guess it wouldn't be surprising if I lost. I ignored her words and continued to sift the flour. Meanwhile, Lisa poured hot water from a pot into a large bowl. What are you doing? I've got to soften the butter a bit. Are you done with the sifting? Something like this, right? Okay, here. She handed me the small bowl of butter and a whisk. What? Slightly dip the bowl with the butter into the hot water, and then slowly stir while the butter is softening. We're just softening the butter, so don't melt it. Afterwards, just keep stirring. Don't give such difficult instructions. You must take a shot at everything in life. I heaved a sigh and sank the bowl into the hot water a bit and started letting the butter melt a little, just as I was told. Next to me was Lisa the foreman staring at me, shouting out things on a whim like, "You're pushing it in too much," or "Put more guts into it." Finally, the butter had become somewhat loose, and I broke it up forcefully and mashed it down. So, how long do I keep stirring? Until it gets to be like melted vanilla ice cream. We don't have any electric mixers? We're in a low-gravity environment, so quit complaining. What has gravity to do with it? I ended up hugging the bowl and started stirring it. At first, it was just sticking to the stirrer, so I wasn't sure whether I was mixing it or just crushing it, but it eventually started turning viscous, so it felt more like mixing. Lisa added a pinch of salt and then, after more mixing, dropped the egg in. Okay, keep on mixing, keep on mixing. Lisa, of all people, started talking in a strange rhythm. I was pretty much totally into it, mashing things around. And then Lisa lifted her head a bit. Oh, Hagana! When I looked up from the bowl, Hagana was frowning and looking this way, as upset as could be. We're making cookies. Want to come help too? I won't. Hagana phrased it simply and walked across the living room to the bathroom. She hasn't been in this bad of a mood for a while. Isn't she always like this? When she's a good mood, she'd ponder it a bit more before saying no. I see. With that, I started getting the feeling that I was beginning to understand why Lisa bothered with me. I wonder if she got hit with that difficult of a problem. Lisa was gradually adding cake flour to the bowl, and I put my heart into mixing it so that it wouldn't clump up. You should at least get some motorized cooking implements. So, how long do I keep mixing? Oh, sorry. A bit longer. Yeah. Alright, no more complaints, mister, since you're going to be enjoying some delicious cookies afterwards. I want to eat them without the manual labor. Stop quibbling. Lisa bopped me in the head, and I brushed her hand away as though it were a nuisance. At that moment, Lisa's mobile terminal let out a ring. Oh, a phone call? I didn't even realize there was a timer going. Lisa got up from the table, picked up the terminal on the wall, and was surprised at the number. Sorry, just keep mixing this for a bit, okay? That was meant to say Lisa, but it said Hal. With that, she went in the direction of the bathroom. I could only hear her muffled voice through the door, but she sounded happy to me. I had inadvertently strained my ear to hear, probably because of a little bit of jealousy on my part. And thus, a sudden ding-dong, like the sound of notes on a dry xylophone, gave me a fright, as though I had been caught misbehaving. What? When I looked around, the door to the bathroom was open, and I could see Lisa's face as she was talking to the terminal. Can you hold on a second? Hal, go get it! What? The door! Oh. It appeared the sound had come from the intercom. Setting the bowl down, I walked half-heartedly over towards the entrance of the church. Lisa went back to the bathroom and continued her conversation. But who would visit this place? Perhaps it was a certain Toyama who had come to collect debts again. While pondering that, I slid open the bolt and opened the door. Oh God, who are you? There stood a petite figure wearing a raincoat and staring down at an electronic notebook, typing away at it. Though, while it was a petite figure, there were bulges on either side of the hips, indicating there were some large packages being transported. The figure was slim, but it was probably a boy. As I looked suspiciously at him, he started talking before looking up. Good afternoon. I'm with Kunko with your usual vegetables. I also have some questions for Miss... And as he looked up, he froze. I could see beautiful blue eyes staring at me through large glasses. There were a few freckles around his small nose, so I realized he must have come from Earth, where the UV is harsher. However, besides that, I could tell from one glance that he looked kinda dim-witted. Say what? When I asked him while he was just standing there, he took a big step back while keeping his eyes on me. It was midday, so there was some passerby, as usual. He had attracted some odd glances, but he didn't move his eyes away from me. And then he regained his senses, looked at his electronic notebook, surveyed the surroundings, and looked at me again. What is it? He shrunk his shoulders reflexively, and then asked me cautiously. This is the 6th Avenue Church, right? I pondered for a moment, and then replied, Now, that name does sound familiar. Is my teacher, Miss Hagana, here? Miss Hagana? I repeated his words and couldn't stop myself from giggling. It was true that she was teaching. She's here. By the way, isn't it kind of dangerous to be standing there? After being told that, it looked like he finally realized he was smack dab in the middle of the road. While I thought he was kind of dim-witted, I did admire his strong steps while he was stepping forward, carrying all that luggage. It looked like he was used to transporting large items. So, what was it again? Yes? Didn't you say something about vegetables? Yes, He cleared his throat and took a big breath. My name is Chris Kun, and I'm from Kunko. No matter if you need fresh foods like vegetables or stationery, we are your one-stop source for delivery to anywhere on 6th Street. We at Kun await your orders. With that, he finished his clear speech in one go. It was probably totally drilled into him by his parents. Even if he stood up straight, he was clearly shorter than me. Hagana was shorter than me, and he was still a bit shorter than her. Oh well, I thought as I pulled back. If you're looking for Hagana, she's inside. Thanks. I guess the fast talk only applied to his spiel, as the Chris I was looking at now averted gazes and walked into the church. At this point, I couldn't figure out if he was a guy or a girl, and then he took off his raincoat inside the church. My confidence fell. And when he took his raincoat... I can't read. And when he took off his raincoat inside the church, my confidence fell even further. A threadbare sweatshirt was obviously too large, drooped over him. Below that were jeans with pant legs totally rolled up, as well as a pair of worn-down sneakers. His blonde hair was puffed up and rough, as if he had never used a comb in his whole life. However, when he folded up the raincoat and tried to jam it into his bag, hanging by the cross straps over his shoulder, I caught a peek of the chest area through an overly large neckline of his sweatshirt. My new hunch was that Chris was probably a girl. What? What? Stop looking at people's chests, my guy. Aren't you supposed to be in school now? While feeling a bit of guilt, I closed the door and asked. Right. Now, school's in lunch recess, so I'm doing the afternoon deliveries. Ah, I see. I guess you guys have long lunch breaks. Which means Chris is an elementary school student and under 14. And you were just checking them out! Perv. With a few exceptions, all the elementary schools on the moon have at least 2 hours of lunch recess. Since I didn't really go to school, I had forgotten about it. You're here to study while... Fuck. You're here to study while delivering the groceries. How did you know? Wait, so what? Alright, do we not know what? Okay, I'm assuming we don't. So this man who has openly thought about beating up women before, just checked out this 14-year-old to determine, I'm gonna just observe. I see a bit on the chest area. It's probably a girl, but it's a child. You fucking weirdo. God damn, this guy is fucked up. I don't like him. I hope you become less of a weird cunt in the future, man. It's so weird. Whatever. Alright. If left to her own devices, she'd probably just stand there looking lost. So I started making Chris walk forward with me behind her, as if I were driving chickens around the yard. Did you say so yourself before? Did you say so yourself before that you had some questions for Hagana or something? Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't even know if it's a guy or a girl, honestly, but it doesn't matter. Even though Chris was timid, she had purposeful strides. Her outfit was definitely that of a low-income earners in the outer districts. They were probably immigrants who came here to do menial labor. Menial is a good word, I need to use that word more. Even though she wasn't quite that street smart, she made large deliveries to help out her family during lunch recess, and was even studying at the same time. While herding her like a farm chicken, I felt a little envious of her hardness. Hardiness. When we returned to the living room, it looked like Lisa was done with her phone call, and was setting a microwave tray on the table. Oh, if it isn't Chris! Good afternoon. Oh, right, I guess today was the usual delivery day. I totally forgot about it. Sounds like there's a lot you forget. She wasn't angry at my jab and merely shrugged. Really, this is the one thing I just can't fix, I guess. While talking, Lisa accepted the vegetables and wheat from Chris's giant bag. This time there was a lot. There wasn't a mistake, was there? No problems here. Hal over there is also living here now. Before your delivery, we had run out of ingredients, so I had gone elsewhere to pick up some personally. Oh, so that's it. I had heard that you went to some other store to shop, and I was wondering if there was because I delivered the wrong amount. She was timid and a worrywart. Before Lisa said anything, she rubbed Chris's head gently. This must have been more effective than telling her 100 times not to worry. So, I guess you're here for Hagana? How? What? That symbol? And how? I'd taken the bowl from Lisa and was staring at its contents when I heard my name mentioned and looked up. What? Go get Hagana for me. Oh, alright. Would you like to make the cookies with us, Chris? Or would you like to make cookies with us, Chris? I got up from the chair and looked in Chris's direction. It would be best if I didn't have to go call Hagana. After looking back and forth at the two of us, she replied while staring at the floor. I have a question about a problem, and, Oh? Well, I'll give the cookies to Hagana so she could bring it to the class tomorrow. So please look forward to them, okay? Okay. That answer was unexpectedly full of energy, and Lisa was also smiling with a satisfied look on her face. Nope. I went over to call Hagana when she peered out from the door after I knocked. I started wondering if Hagana and Chris were really both from the same species. Hagana didn't utter a word while staring at me without opening the door all the way. Perhaps she really was in a bad mood. What? Someone named Chris is here? Said there was something about a problem she couldn't solve? With that, Hagana raised an eyebrow and then nodded slowly. I see. She nodded and was about to step back into her room for a bit, but then opened the door further and looked down the hall. At that moment, Chris was coming over clutching her electronic notebook, which she probably used for her studies. Lisa said that she's using the table, so... I've got it. Hagana nodded, proceeded to invite Chris in, and then told me off. You're in the way. While being somewhat irritated, I stepped out of the way because I was actually blocking the entrance to the room. I sent Chris in with an apologetic face. I couldn't believe that someone like Chris would be so attached to Hagana. The world was full of wonders, I thought, as I headed back to the living room. Alright, I guess this is pretty much it. Lisa was spinning around the contents of the bowl while mixing. It's done. All that's left is to bake them. Easy, isn't it? It was pretty tiring, though. Alright, can you lay pieces of the dough over here neatly? Don't get me. The cookies will turn out delicious because you did it till the end. I had wanted to question the basis of that claim, but it wasn't like she'd give a proper answer anyway. Giving up, I used a spoon to scoop up some dough and laid it on the microwave tray covered with baking paper. Well then, now that this is done, shall we get some lunch? Hal, you're eating too, right? As long as it doesn't cost any extra. Well, aren't you cute? In either case, I'm not charging you anything, so come eat. Besides, Chris is here today, and I was thinking about doing something. Huh? Doesn't she eat at school? I kind of blurted out my response nonchalantly, but Lisa smiled at me with a troubled face. There aren't many things that come for free on the moon. I thought back to Chris's small and slim figure. Maybe she didn't have any money to eat lunch. And she came here for Hagana's math instructions. So it is definitely a she then. Okay, cool. Lisa said as she was cleaning the cooking implements that we had finished using. Chris is also unbelievably smart, but realistically speaking, she wouldn't be able to move onward with her education without a scholarship. Apparently, she's going to hone her best subject, math, and then use that to earn a scholarship to go on to college. In other words, this was a one-shot investment aimed at achieving that goal. Her timidness was only on the surface. Deep down, she was a genius. I felt pinpricks on my heart when I saw people like this who came from the earth. I knew it was meaningless annoyance and envy, but I couldn't do much about it. Well, the truly terrifying one would be Hagana, though. I heard that Chris, who no one would be able to teach math to at school, actually called her a genius. When she grows up, she looks like she'll be able to do... When she grows up, she looks like she'd be able to immediately skip into graduate school without a scholarship. I wasn't the type to be truly happy at hearing praise, but all this about Hagana made me think that she probably really was something as far as a math really... What the fuck am I reading? Agana made me think that she probably really was something as far as math was concerned. What? She was something as far as math was concerned. Okay. I need someone else to do a proofread check on this whole fucking thing, but I'm losing my mind. Okay. However, both of them have some personality issues. Is everyone who's good at math this way? With my diss, Lisa pondered for a moment and chuckled. Well, I wouldn't say they had personality issues, but they sure do have an air of an artist. Chris also says she would ponder tough problems while sitting in places with nice views. Well, I guess being a genius needs something to balance it out. I started to wonder whether my recent issues with not trading well had to do with the disappearance of this excitement I felt while I didn't really have a place to settle down. Not to mention Hagana, but Chris, if you listened to her, sounded like she was built on stubbornness as well. It wasn't a simple affair to skip lunch to learn from Hagana, coming here for studying while running errands during breaks during the school day. That is a lot. Oh. The music stopped. That's sudden. However, once I thought that far, I suddenly realized something. If Agana were that talented in math, could she be of use in trading? What is it? Huh? Nothing. I had stopped setting down the cookie dough, so I started up again hurriedly. Oh, do you think she'll be good in, like, stock market trading? Yeah. But that idea was still bouncing around in my head. When I had started trading, I had tried out various techniques. However, the one thing I didn't try was to use math for trading. A field with such a dignified title as financial engineering was something that would be way too difficult for someone like me, who never really went to school. It was something you'd learn in graduate school after learning math as an undergrad, so it wasn't something I could really try out. But what about Hagana, who was quite talented in math? I had finished laying out the cookies and felt that it would be a good idea to look into this further. All done? Yeah. Even before baking them, it looked as if the raw cookies were about to give off a buttery scent. Lisa picked up the tray and put it into the microwave and gave the dial a good twist. Alright, let's go get some lunch, okay? You gotta burn the fucking church down. Never cook, bake something in an oven or a microwave oven and then leave it. That's a bad idea. Don't leave it unattended. Don't go outside. The shit catches on fire, you're fucked. In sync with her suggestion, I took off my apron and shoved it at Lisa. Don't need lunch. What? Hey, wait, how? I ignored Lisa's demands and ran back to my room. And then I turned on my computer and raced to open the search engine. Investment methods using math was something that the pros used to make boatloads of cash. There was nothing more encouraging than being able to use that. Bearing that hope in my heart, I dove into the net. It's 5. Startled by a voice, I sprang up. Hagana was standing outside the door. It's already 5. Why aren't you coming? She had stated it quite bluntly. With that, I finally remembered what happened in the morning. Oh yeah. Perhaps I was tired, or perhaps I was panicking, but my voice was coarse and I couldn't quite speak clearly. I had immersed myself, pondering out a new way of trading, with Hagana working on financial engineering. Furthermore, since I actually had no clue about math, it was quite tiring. Hagana's brows conveyed a doubtful look, but she didn't really ask me anything. I hurriedly got ready. Out of caution, I placed my computer into my bag and essentially took all of my life possessions with me as I left my room. Hagana had her usual black attire and her black bag, giving off a grim atmosphere as if she were attending a funeral. Not just black clothing, but a black bag? An orange bag wouldn't have worked with these clothes. Wow, looks like you do have a sense of aesthetics. Hagana, who was further down the hall, turned around with a big frown. Of course, unlike you, brat. When we first met, she kept calling me smelly, and this morning she said I wore rags. Shouldn't someone as cheeky as her need some spanking? Hey, you called me brat again. Huh? I'm telling Lisa. Hagana apparently totally yielded to Lisa. To be honest, it wasn't even at the level of childish quarreling, but Hagana stood motionless as if she had made a big mistake. I walked past her, feeling all smug. At that instant, Hagana's hand grabbed my hem. But please don't tell Lisa. She looked like she was about to cry at any moment now. I couldn't keep up with my racing thoughts. A girl about the same age as me had thin, downcast eyebrows and tightened her lips to the point of quivering. Furthermore, her slender hand grasped onto my hem as if it were a lifeline. In that situation, there wasn't much you could do, even if you had done loads of weight training. I had forgotten I was dealing with Hagana, and tried for the life of me to find the proper words. In that regard, my memories were flashing by me as if I were on the verge of death. I heard that this happened to people who were on the verge of death because it was something to allow the person to find possible routes of salvation from past memories. And what I finally remembered was something terribly simple. I won't. Really? Hagana was looking at me almost clingingly with upturned eyes. This was the face she had when I was about to spill the beans about the incident with Toyama. I guess she wanted to keep up appearances with Lisa even more than I had imagined. After I nodded, she stared at me for a while before finally letting go. Well, what is it? Hagana flung a totally unintelligible question at me, after slowly returning to her normal poker-faced self. What? I'm asking you what it is. Her brows were showing signs of frustration. While being shocked at this utter transformation, I eventually asked back, totally not understanding the meaning of her words. What are you talking about? I don't understand. I really didn't understand. Thus, I couldn't help but feel her hesitant at the unreasonable Hagana, who had posed me an unintelligible question while looking at me with frustration when I wasn't able to answer. What the fuck? Stop repeating yourself! Okay. However, Hagana's behavior was also kind of strange. And then the reason for this came to light. While being frustrated, she finally turned her eyes away and responded painfully. Your name. I somehow managed to hold in my laughter, but I did end up spitting out some air lightly. Hagana looked at me with scorn in response, as if I was some rude person. However, her tightly sealed lips made it obvious, even to me, that she was trying to hold in her embarrassment. While leaking some air between my teeth, I replied. Kawara Yoshiharu. Huh? I don't remember it being that long. Are you making fun of me? Hagana's glaring eyes were saying that to me, but I simply accepted that and replied, Oh, yeah, that's my real name. Hal was the name that Lisa gave to me. Hagana looked at me, totally shocked. Your real name? Are you an idiot? Are you an idiot? Those words simply flowed out of her mouth. You've also ran away from home, so it's not like you'd go report me, right? Hagana might be strange, but she fully understood the meaning of a runaway youth letting someone know their real name. She was definitely intelligent, and she wasn't lacking common sense. But there was no need to tell me that. Huh? The reason? But, well, there was that. What? Hagana had no expression on her face, but she was almost asking me angrily. This time, I was a bit bashful when answering. I've never been called by a nickname before. Huh? Around me were a lot of rowdy people older than me, so they simply called me by my first name. I also didn't really go to school, and besides, nicknames were kind of a matter of fact, so I didn't like them. They made me feel kind of funny or something. There was a strange feeling I couldn't quite name when Lisa called me Howl. It was definitely not a bad sensation. However, with the current situation, it didn't feel quite right. Feeling all flippant over being called a nickname by some woman amounted to being called being a coward. Pardon me. So, if you're going to call me something, then Kaora would be kind of bad. You can just call me by my first name. Well, if that annoying lady went around, you could just call me Brat or Hey You, and I wouldn't mind. With my light proclamation, Hagana looked down and pondered my words. She looked like a kid who had been tricked too many times. A skeptical girl in black clothing. The notion that it was clothing appropriate for something like a funeral popped back into my head. Or perhaps it was the clothes she had on her when she was sold. So, can I just call you Hagana? She nodded to my question. After nodding, she opened her mouth to try and say something. I didn't catch what she said and asked her, but she returned to her senses quickly and shut her mouth. And then she had an icy expression on her face, as if she overly cleansed all emotion from herself, then turned her cheek toward me. In front of me was a side profile, a barrier that would reflect back any words hurled at it, possessed solely by females with tough personalities. We should get going with the clothes shopping. She uttered those words robotically and started walking out. The speed of her change in expression and behavior left me dumbfounded. And then, a few steps ahead of me, she apparently noticed that I wasn't following her. She spun around like a well-made toy. What are you doing? Aren't you coming? Are you an idiot? I replied tiredly with a yeah, and started walking. Perhaps she wasn't satisfied with that response, because she lifted an eyebrow. But in the end, she didn't say anything and turned around, walking forward silently. Lisa, who had been cleaning up the church, looked at us walking at a distance from each other and said, "Have a safe trip," with a wry smile. Okay, empty text box. I actually forgot we were going clothes shopping. I forgot that was something that was happening. I was too immersed in the cookie baking with no view of the cookies. The rain had already let up. The carved-out limestone cliffs and the winding, narrow streets, drenched with water, were sparkling under a simulated sunset. Normally, I'd be exploiting the low gravity and taking flying leaps from wall to rooftop and vice versa, but Agata wasn't cut out for it. Of course, it wasn't that she was a girl. There were sports programs where a bunch of girls with bodies as flexible as felines would run through very complicated terrain as if they were ninja warriors. However, these activities just didn't fit Hagana. It would be more fitting for her to be scrunching up her eyebrows and sipping tea outside of the boisterous and sweet-filled stadium. Sweat-filled stadium, my god. And so, we were currently walking towards the shopping centre, supposedly located on the second block, and Hagana would look back at me occasionally. It wasn't that she was carrying a torch for me or anything like that. It was just too much for me to be able to walk alongside a girl, so I kept a bit of a distance. And since we were walking slowly through the streets, there were a lot of things I wanted to see. Therefore, I could just understand Hagana's irritation, seeing as I had trailed behind so many times. At any rate, there wasn't a thing in this world that you couldn't attach a price tag to, and therefore the streets were a treasure trove of information to me. It's because as long as something could be sold, someone would be earning a profit on it. What I wanted to know was who, in this case. For example, I myself couldn't make money by going into the building materials business, selling materials and working on construction. However, I could invest in a company that did that and be able to share in the profits. I could do this via stock investments. If I could earn money without having to pour hours of my own sweat into it, then wouldn't that be the proper thing to do? I had less respect for those who worked on the soil and grew vegetables like my parents, and more for those who bought the crops from my parents and sold them at a profit. By just investing in the latter party, I could even save myself the work of doing the actual reselling. By glimpsing at the houses along the street, the building materials and doors, the toys hanging from the window frames, and the furniture and electronics that could be seen, I could determine what people in the income bracket here bought and what was currently popular. What people passing by wore, what terminals they had with them, and what stores they went into. If there were indeed 4,000 or so companies trading on the stock exchange, one would definitely be able to see a product from them, at least one of these companies, everywhere you went. The seeds to money-making lay all over the place, and I was merely peeling back the fruit to get at the seed. And this method was the fastest and best way to get rich. Or should have been. Right now, my confidence was wavering as to whether this was really the best way. As a result, I thought up getting Hagana to learn financial engineering and then leveraging her power. But was that really possible? First, would Hagana be able to understand financial engineering? And second, would Hagana simply help me out? We're here. Hagana stopped and said those words to me. New CG. New music. Weird. Weird tune. Okay. We had walked along a street jammed between buildings 6 to 7 stories high, which felt like they could fall over at any moment and block our way, and went up the crude steps. We had passed women with their shopping bags full of ingredients, and students with lightly warmed sausages in their mouths. Hagana was standing at the top of the steps. There, beyond the rusty iron handrails, extended a street lined with shops doing their very best to show off their tidiness. This was supposedly the second block shopping centre. The street extended outwards, flanked by buildings on either side, and the flow of people appeared like a small river sandwiched between the run-down commercial buildings. The incoming foot traffic was stopped up by the steps beneath my feet. Seeing this, I realized that where I stood was a vestige from days past, during the expansion of the lower city. Originally, this place was the edge of the city. This elevated area was the foundation for a dome that covered the sky, programmed to act out the effects of day and night. Currently, the edge of the dome was much farther away, and leaves like this were leaves like this obviated by advances in technology. I don't know what that means. Okay. However, precisely because this was ancient, actually standing here gave me a literally awesome view. I wasn't sure whether it was made of concrete or carved out of the lunar terrain, but there was definitely something like a leaves extending to my left and right. It was immediately swallowed up by a myriad of buildings, so I couldn't follow it for very far, but I was able to see a piece of lunar history here. What? Hagana looked at me with a puzzled face. It looked like scrunching up her brows was her instinctive response to anything puzzling. I looked up and explained it to her. This was a vestige of where the ceiling dome used to be. Hagana looked up at the sky and fixed her eyes on the faint seams of the dome. You're kidding. I'm not lying. When I was around 8 or something, there was a project to build an even bigger dome over the small dome. Is that really true? Hagana looked at me doubtfully. I shrugged and replied, I wouldn't lie about something you could simply look up and figure out instantly. Hagana drew her chin in a bit and nodded, seeing the reason in my reply. And thus, I remember even now that the moon used to have 2 layers of sky. I looked up at the sky as I was talking and noticed Hagana looking at me. Finally, Hagana looked up at the sky herself and muttered, "Wow." It was just one word, but the brevity indicated the strength of the thought behind it. I was excited, as if she were giving me a compliment. "I know because I was born on the moon. I don't really know much about the Earth, but I know most of the stuff about the moon." "Born on the moon?" "Oh, I didn't tell you? I was born when the first wave of the immigration group arrived in the city. I'm about the same age as this city." Hagana looked like she was truly quite surprised, and I felt a little proud of myself. However, the surprise from her face eventually disappeared, and she returned to her normal poker face and said, "Well, it takes many years for a city to be built, so you can't be of the same age." "Well, the time it takes for a human to be created isn't counted in the age, right?" "I guess you're right." For a second, I thought I had surprised her again, but Hagana nodded as if she understood some profound truth. "Well, looking up at this again once in a while, I do wonder at the amount of effort put in to create this." As I talked, I squinted at the dome that made up the sky on the lunar surface. As one of the top public works projects in the history of the lunar surface, it involved over 1,000 different enterprises. However, whenever I looked up at the dome and sighed, it wasn't about the technologies that made this dome possible, but something easier to understand. The infrastructure of the city was supported by the Emerald Industries, and its related companies supposedly made up 40% of the participants in that project. And its 24 billion more profit that year remained the record for the highest annual gain to this day. Of course, on Earth, there were many conglomerates whose annual earnings exceeded this ghastly amount due to the vastness and history and scope of the planet. However, on the moon, this was a record that was off the charts. There were anti-monopoly laws that prevent the breakdown of competition, and people said that if those laws weren't there, the Sea of Tranquility would have already had Emerald Industries' logo engraved on it. The 24 billion more price tag was enough to make anyone faint just thinking about it. For people working in the shops along the second block of the 6th outer section, hourly wages most likely ranged between 5 and 7 moles. Let's say they made 80 moles working 10 hours a day. Working 30 days non-stop in a month resulted in 2,400 moles. A year would be 28,800 moles. Working from the age of 20 until the age of 60 would be a bit over 1 million moles. Rent and living expenses were rather high on the moon, and therefore living with just those earnings was difficult. I'd think you were mad if you were to say that living from meal to meal was fun. I agree. You wouldn't be able to enjoy the various entertainment options in the White Belt and Newton City, and if you were from Earth, you wouldn't even be able to afford to go back. To live a life where the things you couldn't do vastly outnumbered the things you could do would make life meaningless, in my opinion. That is a good quote. To live life where the things you couldn't do outnumber the things you could do would make life meaningless. Like, as harsh as that is actually a good quote. I like that. To tilt this balance, one would need power or money. And using money and power, Emerald Industries left a mark where no entity has left a mark before in the history of the moon. Is there something in the sky? I came to quickly upon hearing Hagana's words. Nah, I was just thinking a bit about an existence above the clouds. Of course, being born on the moon, I had never seen real clouds before, but I knew about them through videos and stories, thus I felt like this expression was quite suitable. Hagana, who definitely wouldn't know about the Emerald Industries, looked questioningly at the sky and then stared at me with surprise. You believe in God? You mean like what Lisa talk about? O Lord who lives in the kingdom of heaven. People on earth believed that the afterlife existed beyond the heavens. Certainly, to people interested in making money, the moon was probably heaven, but in this era, there probably weren't many people who'd used that word to mean anything other than a happy place. It's like people started to think not to think of actual difficult to use and outdated books when the word book was mentioned. Something like God can't exist, right? In response, Haganah neither agreed nor refuted my statement, and she merely stared at me. She had the normal expressionless face, but looked a lot more serious than usual. I was beginning to wonder if she had gotten mad at me for speaking like I was ridiculing Lisa, but Haganah eventually closed her eyes slowly. And then, like a proud stray cat, she threw her face to the side, avoiding my gaze. I also think so too. I was about to tease her by mentioning how it was quite rare for her to agree with me, but in the end I kept my mouth shut. It was because that side profile looked terribly sad. Looking at her visage, I ended up remembering what Lisa had said. Lisa had wondered if perhaps Haganah had been bought with money. A girl who might have a past like that, agreeing sadly that God didn't exist, left a very deep impact. Uncomfortable at the silence, I veered the situation back towards talking. So, what was it like? The place you're from? What is it like, the place you're from? Eh? Weren't you born on Earth? What was the sky like? Was it something that, when you stared at it, would make you wonder if God lived there? Since Haganah apparently had hidden her origins from even Lisa, she probably wouldn't tell me anything related to where she was from. Thinking about that made me kind of want to ask. I really didn't have any knowledge of Earth other than through footage, and I had never asked anyone what the sky was like. Surprisingly, Haganah replied while looking up at the sky. It looked kind of like that, what it does here. You mean like the moon? Yes. There were lots of mountains and many cliffs. The trees had a ton of prickly things that would prick you if you touched them. Winter was cold and summer was short. There was a lot of fog, a grey place. Even if I hadn't visited Earth, I had a rough image of Earth's geography. Cold winters would point toward the northern hemisphere, and a place where conifers grew had to be quite high in latitude. But as she continued speaking, Haganah squinted and tried to peer through the dome at the spot where the Earth stood. Sometimes it would clear up, and the sky was very blue. The lushness of everything would only shine during those moments. It probably wasn't a bad lie to say that this was something created by God. At the end, Haganah added in something surprisingly thoughtful. However, from that tone, I didn't think that her days were always happy where she grew up. There might be rough folks back home who'd be able to guess where she came from. However, I still couldn't fathom a sky so blue that it would make someone wonder if it was created by God. A blue sky would just be the dome covering a lunar city, created scientifically. However, there wouldn't be one person who'd look at that and think without a doubt that this was created by God, and thus, compared to Earth, the moon probably didn't have much of a sky. Hearing the folks from Earth priding themselves over where they came from would merely irritate me, but all that Haganah had said led me to want to take a look for myself. While pondering those things, I looked up at the dome with Haganah. Instead of talking about this, let's go get this clothes shopping done already. Hagana, however, looked back down and spoke to me officiously. For me, who had felt a bizarre closeness to Hagana, it felt like being suddenly pulled out of a dream. Yeah. Alright, I think that is where I'm going to leave things for now, with the funky music. It got surprisingly, like, a little bit deep towards the end there. I didn't know the best place to cut it off. I feel like having that little bit of attachment with Hagana, like how I'm glad how is he keeps backflipping. Like, he is such a fucking asshole. Like, that's the thing. That's his constant trait. He just did this with Chris. He's an asshole to whoever he meets straight away, and it takes him a while to actually form a connection and, like, be a bit nicer towards them, which is fair enough. I know some people are like that, but, like, the internal monologue and the thoughts he has behind these new people he doesn't know are always so fucking weird and perverse at the beginning. And then he, like, settles down and is just like, oh no, be a normal good person for now. It's very weird dichotomy. It's, I don't know, just the way it's expressed is very weird, but it's him. It's just something we gotta get used to. It's him. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed this thus far. Make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Check out the playlist of the other episodes. And don't forget to check out the link and buy a copy or pre-order a copy of my book, The Protector Volume 1. Thank you very much, guys. I will see you next time.